Canary Islands sponsors the weather.
I'm Neil Oliver. You can join me live every Saturday evening for opinions and discussions about the week's top stories. There's also a smattering of history and archaeology and features that define our great British Isles. You'll hear my thoughts unfiltered, as well as those of my guests, and we don't always agree. And we want to hear from you too. Neil Oliver Live, Saturdays from 7 on GB News.
You're watching GB News live across the UK and the world on our digital stream.
GB News is Britain's news channel.
We are the UK's home of discussion and debate from all perspectives.
We are here for you. Don't forget to join our YouTube community by clicking on that subscribe button.
And if you want the GB News app, you can click and catch up on programmes anytime.
We love to hear from you, so email us.
gbviews@gbnews.uk.
Thanks for being part of the GB News family.
My name is Andrew Doyle. Join me every Sunday evening at 7 p.m. for Free Speech Nation. This is a show where we address current affairs and news stories of the week with the help of two wonderful comedian panellists. I brought in comics because I want to give it a lighter edge, and also they work for less. See you there.
Join my show Farage, 7 p.m. till 8 p.m. Monday through Thursday, and there you will get opinion, analysis, debate, and I'll cover stories that nobody else dares to touch. And then for the last 15 minutes, talking pints. We're over a drink. We have a civilised conversation with someone. We very often disagree, but we do it in a grown-up way. Come and join me on Farage.
I'm Colin Brazier. I've reported from more than 70 countries around the world, covered wars from Afghanistan to Iraq, from Lebanon to the Balkans. I'm trying to bring that experience, that feel for events, to the studio. And something else. I'm ready to give an opinion. Today's stories with a spark. Brazier from 8 p.m. weekdays on GB News.
Hello there, I'm Andrew Doyle. I'm delighted to be joining you on this bank holiday evening. Coming up, COVID infections hit a new record high on Christmas Day, but there are to be no new restrictions in England. So, did the other UK nations put restrictions in place too early? Joining me to discuss this, as well as some of the other day's top stories and tomorrow's front pages, is my superstar panel. Esther Kraku, social and political commentator. Benjamin Butterworth, late editor for the iPaper. That's his job title, by the way, he hasn't died or anything. And Kerry Dingle, filmmaker. Also coming up, study drugs. What are they? Are they rife at universities? We're going to find out more on the apparent performance-enhancing pills that are helping students prepare for exams or to hit essay deadlines. And you can get in touch, just email us at gbviews@gbnews.uk, or you can contact us on Twitter at gbnews. But first, it's the news with Polly Middlehurst.
Andrew, thank you. Good evening. This is your news at 10 o'clock. The Health Secretary says there are to be no new COVID restrictions introduced in England before the new year. Tighter measures, though, have been introduced elsewhere in the UK, and Sajid Javid says the government won't hesitate to act if restrictions are needed in England. Prime Minister Boris Johnson has also urged everyone to continue to act cautiously following the rising numbers of Omicron levels. The new figures show England reported over 98,000 new cases of COVID over Christmas Day and Boxing Day, with 143 deaths also being reported. Professor Carol Sakura told GB News the government has made the right decision.
The number of people in hospital that are COVID positive is around 8,000. It has been plateauing for the last 2 months. There's no surge. Sure, there's a surge in the numbers, frighteningly high with Omicron, but it's now beginning to go down. I think it's all good news, and Boris made the right call.
Professor Sakura. Well, in Scotland, they've recorded their highest number of COVID cases, with nearly 30,000 people testing positive over the 3-day Christmas period. And a quick warning, the next few images do show flashing lights. The upsurge in positive results come as new restrictions on hospitality venues have come into force in the country in an attempt to stop the spread of the Omicron variant. And in Northern Ireland, similar new measures have been introduced, including the rule of 6 for eating or drinking out, and establishments only allowed to offer table service. Meanwhile, the French government will impose fresh restrictions in 2022 to curb the spread of coronavirus. From next week, big events will be limited to 2,000 people indoors and 5,000 outdoors. Customers will be requested to sit down during concerts and not allowed to stand up in bars. Eating and drinking will be banned in cinemas, theatres, sports facilities and on public transport. Working from home will be mandatory at least 3 days a week for employees whose job makes it possible. The new rules will be in place for at least 3 weeks. Now, away from COVID, the Business and Energy Secretary has met with energy bosses to ensure UK customers are protected amid rapidly rising wholesale gas prices. Kwasi Kwarteng held discussions with chief executives of major suppliers following calls on the government to step in over fears of runaway household bills in the new year. Since the start of September, more than 24 energy companies have gone bust. A government spokesperson said meetings between the sector and ministers will continue over the coming days to ensure UK consumers are protected. The numbers of Boxing Day shoppers on the high street fell to almost half of pre-pandemic levels. New figures show that footfall at shopping sites across the UK yesterday was 41% lower than the 2019 level. Those numbers, which come from the industry analyst Springboard, say nervousness about the COVID variant has played a part. That's all from me for now. I'm back in an hour. Now back to Andrew. See you soon.
Thank you, Polly. I'm joined now by my superstar panel, Esther Kraku, social and political commentator, Benjamin Butterworth, late editor for the iPaper, and Kerry Dingle, filmmaker. Welcome. Hello, all.
Good evening.
Hi. Feeling good? I've had such a gluttonous festive season. I've eaten so much Terry's chocolate orange. I'm basically a shareholder at this point.
The white
it's pretty
chocolate
grim.
one or the...
No, the orange one, the orange milk chocolate, yeah.
Okay.
I'm traditional like
They
that.
have a white chocolate one as
Do they?
Which
Don't tell me that, because then I'm going to go and buy that. And
it's in my freezer.
It's in your freezer?
Yeah, so I'm like, it's not in my fridge, so it doesn't look like I'm eating it, but...
Oh, it's cunning. That's cunning. I mean, do you feel, though, that this part of the year, these last few days, basically before New Year, it feels like I can be a slob, we can be as slobbish as we like, eat what we want, do what we want, and then a resolution, day one, New Year's Eve, turn our life around?
I mean, I got to the point where I stopped pretending. I just took a whole pie to my room, because I usually go... At some point, I just carried the whole pie to my room and just ate straight out of the tin.
Just embrace it, absolutely. Any New Year's resolutions, any of you?
I mean, not to take pies to my room would be, a good resolution.
I mean, at some point, you just have to just stop lying to yourself.
I think it is actually a good... people are very cynical, aren't they, about things like dry January and things like that. I think it's actually quite a good idea. Just
no.
What? No, you think it's
I'm not being funny. January is the most miserable month of the year. I want wet January, OK? That's the very month you need wine to get...
Really?
So many things.
Benjamin, you're just going to drink through January.
Like the other months.
Well, that's the spirit.
Literally.
Listen, we've got to get on with the news stories today. So New Year's Eve plans in England have been given the green light after Sajid Javid confirmed the government will not be imposing any further restrictions before the new year. Health Secretary said people should remain cautious when taking part in celebrations this weekend and take a lateral flow test before attending events. The decision comes as latest figures show England reported a record number of new cases on Christmas Day. Kerry, can I come to you first about this? This is an interesting one, and I wonder how people around the country are going to feel, because, of course, England now has a completely different policy from Scotland, from Northern Ireland, from Wales. Do you think this is the right decision?
Oh, absolutely. And I actually think it would be great if people from Scotland all descend on England and join in the party, because we've absolutely had enough of sacrificing our freedom, our social life, our fun for a disease that, for the majority of young people who want to party, are not going to get ill and are not going to be in hospital and are not going to die. So, great. Party on.
So this is the point. I'm going to come to you, Benjamin, because I imagine you're going to disagree with that. But would you accept that? I mean, apparently, I'm not a scientist, but the Omicron variant is a much milder version of the disease. So is there a case for what Kerry is saying?
I mean, look, I love dancing. People don't generally like to see my dancing, but I would. I enjoy doing
I'm sure you're a lovely mover.
but a month ago, I was gladly sort of going out and leading a normal life. I think the Omicron variant, in terms of the risk of getting it and having to isolate, is a fundamentally different situation we're in terms of the risk level of getting it. Now, I think the evidence that came out from the UK Health Security Agency said that you're 50 to 70% less likely to be hospitalised with this version of COVID than Delta, the previous prevalent one. Now, the problem is that the number of cases going round are more than double what they were for the previous sort of 5 months after we unlocked. And so in terms of, hospitals being overwhelmed, we're still in a similar position. Now, although I sort of disagree, I don't actually entirely disagree with the idea that we shouldn't lock down. I think, locking down shouldn't be a routine public health lever. It is an extreme measure, even though I agreed with the previous ones. I don't think there's any justification for saying that between people's different households there should be limits. I can comprehend it for nightclubs or, limiting who can be in pubs and restaurants and things, because the government can directly give them money to try and fix that problem while using it as a public health measure. But I actually don't think they should stop people going between each other's houses at this point.
So you don't trust people to make reasonable decisions, and you think they're all going to kill Granny unless you and the government decide that they should be restricted in some way by some measure. Because evidence shows that all the restrictions and lockdowns, all they've done is actually kill people.
Well, that, of course, is not correct, because...
Well, it is correct, isn't it?
Well, clearly it's not.
Let's just hear...
Can I just ask, you said give them money. Where do you propose this money comes from?
Well, I mean, the furlough funds and stuff. Look, it's been very expensive. There's no doubt about it. Incredibly expensive.
Can we go down that rabbit hole?
Let's bring Esther in now. But what is your feeling about all of this, Esther?
Enough.
Enough. Okay.
March next year will be 2 years of this utter lunacy. Can we please have... I'm not asking for much. I just want an adult conversation, not like the Brexit one where we had doomsday sort of news outlets on both ends.
Yeah.
I just want to have an adult public discourse on what living with COVID looks like. I don't want to hear anything about getting lateral flow tests every day. I don't want to hear about not being able to bump into someone in a bar. What does life look like 2 years on from this nightmare?
But to take what Benjamin is saying here, I mean, his concern, from what you've said, is more to do with the pressure on the NHS as opposed to, given that this is a less virulent
NHS is not built for, it's not the National COVID Service, it's the National Health Service. I'm getting texts. I'm a healthy 25-year-old woman. I work out for like 5 days a week. I'm getting texts about getting a booster, but I can't see my GP. This is ridiculous. This is getting nuts. And then, we need to have a conversation about what living with COVID looks like, with the recognition that it will always be around, no more lockdowns, because if that's the case, we're going to be locking down forever at some point in our lives.
So, Benjamin, do you accept that this is now a disease that we do have to learn to live with in some way, and that we can't therefore just implement a lockdown whenever a new variant materialises?
No, in many ways, I do agree with that. The idea that we should have a lockdown like the one we had in the early months of this year, well, I don't think that would be justifiable at this stage, because the problem is that people are in very different positions. So someone like me, who's 29, healthy, with a little extra weight, and has had 3 vaccines, is obviously at a very low risk. And so people are in very different positions. The argument for a lockdown was always to slow the spread. Yes. The justification for that was everyone could get vaccinated, but we're not in that place exactly.
With the Omicron variant, which is so much more transmissible than previous variants, will you accept that this is actually the kind of thing we know we're all going to get it? We are all going to get this at some point, and so therefore, isn't this a more positive thing? We can see this as a possible step towards herd immunity for once. This might be something that we should now entertain as a serious thing. I'll come to you, Kerry. What do you think about this idea?
Well, I'm not wild about the herd immunity idea, but I think it's real. And for a younger generation that aren't going to get very ill, I think that's fine. I think for elderly and vulnerable people, that's more problematic. But hopefully, I don't mind if we have to have a booster every year. I think it'd be great if these new jabs and actually new pills that are coming out as treatments. But I do entirely agree with Esther that we should stop treating the NHS as this god, and when clearly that deals with just COVID, because Benjamin's restrictions and lockdowns, which were about preserving a public service that's clearly not fit for purpose, if it hasn't got the elasticity to deal with staff shortages and redeployment, or to deal with cancer and heart attacks and kills people by moving them back into care homes with COVID. And in London, we know this week, 1/3 of the Omicron infections are happening when you've been in hospital for more than a week, which is fairly frightening. So we have an NHS not fit for purpose. Don't try and solve it by punishing us. It's a service.
Or sinking more money into it.
hang on.
It's like the black hole of public spending. Reform it. I mean, but that's...
What would that reform look like, though? I mean, how could you address this particular
But this is the
issue?
thing. We can't even have a conversation about reforming the NHS because we don't know what the country's going to look like a year from now, which is why the conversation about what living with COVID is so important. What if businesses can't plan? Surely our healthcare industry can't plan. Other industries can't plan. Nothing can happen if we don't have a conversation about what it looks like.
But you talk about living with COVID. Can you envisage any scenario where you would support any kind of lockdown?
No. I envisage a scenario where people take responsibility for their health, which was what we were doing before COVID, and we should keep doing.
So, Kerry, you didn't support the first lockdown at all?
No, not at all. And the ludicrous nature of it. I mean, do you remember we couldn't sit on a bench? Homeless people could not sit on a pavement. You had to stand up.
Homeless people have
Everything
been
was taped off.
Lodgings if they get a jab.
Which they should have. I don't think a lockdown can ever be justifiable because basically it says as individuals within society, as citizens, we are incapable of making rational decisions about what's best for our family, our peers, our community, when actually we're best placed to make those decisions.
So let me clarify. Your solution would not be lockdown, therefore. It is about personal responsibility. If you are vulnerable yourself, shield yourself.
And,
take the measures
shield
yourself.
and help your family and your neighbours and your friends and do what's wise. I think the government's role should be to advise, not to control.
OK, Benjamin, do you want to come? But of course, let Benjamin come in on
But I mean, that doesn't make sense. And there's a reason why, every government in the world of every different political persuasion worked out that lockdowns... Hang on, let me argue.
I understand your point of view.
Well, I'm coming round to it. That's what happens when I speak. Is that if they had lockdowns, because clearly... You can't, if you have COVID and you don't realise it, and the reason COVID was so dangerous was because of asymptomatic cases, right? That's why it managed to spread in the way unlike others. And so it isn't good enough to say, certainly if we roll back to the start of this year and last year, it's not good enough to say, oh, but I'm taking responsibility for myself, because if you don't know you've got it, you could have been killing someone else. And that's why, when it was at its most infectious and when we didn't have vaccines, lockdown was necessary.
People can't understand that, Benjamin.
So
Only
his
you can.
argument is you should lock down your life because you might give it to someone who wouldn't have taken responsibility.
Can I just
Benjamin, everyone got that.
Benjamin, can
You're in a tiny
can I
minority.
just put this as a question for you? So I understand the point that you're making here, that effectively it's because you might inflict something on someone else. In other words, the responsibility isn't just about yourself. It's about spreading the virus.
It's impossible to have individual risk in a contagious virus.
But then would you apply that? So, for instance, this year, we know that normal flu is going to kill more people than Omicron. So would you recommend or advocate criminal restrictions against people going out for flu?
No.
What's the difference?
Because the scale of how fast it spreads and the likelihood to kill someone, we know for a fact is significantly more risky than it is for flu. And
actually,
it is. That's completely wrong.
It's not.
Well, there's a reason far more people get sick from COVID than from flu. And actually, by the way,
it's
Ofcom rules
incredible.
state very
Flu
clearly
has
that
somehow
you can't
vanished
say
this winter, which is incredible.
Sorry, say that again.
Also, Ofcom rules are very clearly that you can't say that flu is like COVID.
Well,
COVID is much more dangerous
there's
than flu.
normally 1,000 hospitalisations a day with respiratory diseases, and most of those are secondary infections from colds and flu or now Omicron. It's not a new phenomenon in that regard.
But this is the point. Nobody was saying that the flu is the same as COVID. What we're making an analogy here. If you're saying that lockdowns are justifiable on the basis of the number of deaths or the possibility of spreading infection, that is surely applicable to other viruses, is it not?
No, because as the Church of COVID, you must worship at the feet of COVID. You must bow down and fear COVID because nothing else exists. And the NHS has to cater for other illnesses that actually...
And they can't do that if they're overwhelmed with COVID
No,
cases.
they can't do that.
That's why we had
a conversation of what living with COVID looks like. Because it's not going anywhere.
Do you think part of the problem is that the NHS is struggling at the moment because so many people are off work? I mean, that's really what's happening here.
And we're about to fire more people in April who haven't got the jab, so that's...
But it's not just that. It's the fact that people can't go into work if they live with someone who has contracted COVID, or if they're suspected, or if they have symptoms. Is that really the problem? And how would you possibly seek to redress this? Because surely they're doing the right thing by staying at home, aren't they?
Well, a good step, I know this may be revolutionary, would be not to fire people in the first place. But what do I know? If we have staff shortages, maybe the right idea would be to fire more people who don't...
Terry, is it that simple?
Well, no, not particularly. I think that there needs to be I would like to know that there's been a huge recruitment drive, so we don't have staff shortages. I would like to know why there can't be redeployment, why there isn't built-in elasticity. We built redundant Nightingale hospitals on the back of a panic, which were, I think, only 50 cases ever went into the one in London. We have huge backlog of over 5 million people waiting for cancer and other vital treatment, not COVID.
Yeah.
And therefore, in my view, we should stop worshipping the NHS and demand that we have one fit for purpose.
Does this
with built-in elasticity?
Let me just bring Benjamin in here. Does that concern you at all? Is the possibility that people are missing important appointments for other
Well, I'd say two things. First of all, the argument about the fact that clearly it wasn't flexible enough and that it wasn't staffed appropriately is all perfectly reasonable and that you should reform it. But you can't do that in the middle of a pandemic. That's the last thing you have the ability to do when we're in a situation like this. So it's not really an answer to the questions that we face in the short term. On the one of the NHS dealing with people that don't have COVID, well, the argument is flawed because if you had far more people getting seriously sick with COVID, as was a much bigger risk at the start of this year and last year, then it literally becomes impossible for them to treat other people because the NHS is overwhelmed with people sick with COVID. So that's why I just don't accept the argument that somehow lockdown caused the backlog. It would have been much worse if someone had got hit by a bus and couldn't get seen by a doctor because they were overwhelmed by COVID
Esther,
cases.
quickly, last word to you. Do you have anything to say about Beth's view there?
I take the point that you can't really focus on restaffing during a pandemic because people are not as mobile. But the argument is planning, right? You can't plan if you don't know what's going to happen. We need to have a serious conversation about what NHS would look like when there's always going to be COVID in society. Because that's not going anywhere. There's no such thing as zero COVID. And this is the argument I've been making from the start. You can talk about lockdowns this or, delaying the spread that. If we do not have an adult conversation about what we're willing to tolerate in the future and what actually living with COVID looks like, there's nothing else that can be said that matters.
Well, this is a fascinating debate. There's actually probably more common ground here than would seem. But anyway, we're going to go to a break now. Coming up, we ask if trail hunting should be banned after today's delayed Boxing Day meetings. But first, the weather.
It's time to remind ourselves there's always another winter. Canary Islands sponsors the weather.
Looking ahead to tomorrow's weather, and the UK is looking wet and windy first thing, but it should improve a little later on. Let's take a look at the detail. So blustery in the morning then across the southwest of England, a mixture of sunny spells and scattered heavy showers. Gales also possible around the coast for a time. A very gusty morning, in fact, for southeast England and the London area as well, with some heavy showers moving through, mild temperatures of around 11 degrees Celsius. Wales also getting off to quite a windy start. Gales across the southwest of the country, heavy showers continuing to move inland as well. Across the Midlands and here, outbreaks of rain are expected as well. Heavy rain affecting the northwest. Temperatures reaching around 9 Celsius in Manchester. Winds beginning to get a little stronger by lunchtime. And a lot of cloud expected across northeast England through Tuesday morning with hill fog as well. Patchy rain and drizzle over the hills and especially around the coasts. Highs reaching around 8 degrees Celsius. A frosty start across northern parts of Scotland with some sunshine to begin with. Cloudier further south with some patchy rain or drizzle and still chilly with highs of about 7 Celsius. Overnight rain will continue to move away from Northern Ireland with some sunshine developing across the west. Breezy for all, making it feel a little chilly and a top temperature there of 8 degrees Celsius. So rain tending to ease across the UK then as we move through the afternoon, but staying largely cloudy and damp.
Canary Islands sponsors the weather.
You're watching GB News live across the UK and the world on our digital stream.
GB News is Britain's news channel.
We are the UK's home of discussion and debate from all perspectives.
We are here for you. Don't forget to join our YouTube community by clicking on that subscribe button.
And if you want the GB News app, you can click and catch up on programmes anytime.
We love to hear from you, so email us.
gbviews@gbnews.uk.
Thanks for being part of the GB News family.
My name is Andrew Doyle. Join me every Sunday evening at 7 p.m. for Free Speech Nation. This is a show where we address current affairs and news stories of the week with the help of two wonderful comedian panellists. I brought in comics because I want to give it a lighter edge, and also they work for less. See you there.
Join my show Farage, 7 p.m. till 8 p.m. Monday through Thursday, and there you will get opinion, analysis, debate, and I'll cover stories that nobody else dares to touch. And then for the last 15 minutes, talking pints. We're over a drink. We have a civilised conversation with someone. We very often disagree, but we do it in a grown-up way. Come and join me on Farage.
I'm Colin Brazier. I've reported from more than 70 countries around the world, covered wars from Afghanistan to Iraq, from Lebanon to the Balkans. I'm trying to bring that experience, that feel for events, to the studio. And something else, I'm ready to give an opinion. Today's stories with a spark. Brazier from 8 p.m. weekdays on GB News.
Join us for the Political Correction. We're here every Sunday to correct politics and put you, the people, back in charge.
We talk about all areas of the United Kingdom, including Northern Ireland.
Our debate goes way beyond the Westminster Village. It's about the real country. It's about your opinion. So please, we want you to tell us what you think.
This is the Political Correction.
Every Sunday morning from 10 a.m. here on GB News.
You're watching GB News live across the UK, the world, and our digital stream.
GB News is Britain's news channel.
We are the UK's home of discussion and debate from all perspectives.
We're here for you. Don't forget to join our community by hitting the subscribe button.
And download the GB News app so you can click and catch up on programmes anytime.
We love to hear from you. Email us at gbviews@gbnews.uk.
Thanks for being part of the GB News family.
Keep it clean.
Welcome back.
If
Hundreds of people attended the Avonvale hunt in Wiltshire this morning, but the meeting soon descended into violence as anti-hunt protesters clashed with hunters. While fox hunting has been banned for over a decade, enthusiasts still ride out led by their dogs who follow a human-laid trail. Critics argue that this is just a thinly veiled means of getting around the law. So joining me now is Vanessa Hudson, leader of the Animal Welfare Party. Vanessa, thank you for joining me today. Vanessa, can I ask you about this trail hunting? Isn't the whole point of this in order to prevent people from hunting foxes? And in other words, isn't this a good thing for animal rights?
No, I mean, if you look at how trail hunting came about, it developed after the Hunting Act came into force in 2005, and it has been a way for the hunting community to find ways to carry on hunting under what you might say is a veneer of respectability. So they've looked for ways to exploit the Hunting Act, looked for exemptions in the Hunting Act, and used those to carry on what they were doing before. So what we see with trail hunting is that we still see foxes, hares, other wild animals being chased, and that when they are caught on film, for example, they use one of the exemptions in the Hunting Act, or they say that it was an accident, that their hounds were out of control. And we see that this has been happening for 16 or so years now that these cases have been going on. But what's happened in the last year or so is that new evidence has come to light that's kind of pretty, you can't dispute it. We had leading huntsmen caught on a webinar that was filmed last year talking about how to, encouraging those watching to carry out illegal activities and pretend that they were under the veil of trail hunting, and how to do this effectively. Now, that went to court. The person was found guilty. And, that's brought that to light. And now people are questioning why on earth, if we're a nation of animal lovers, would we permit this activity to take place in the year 2021? And so following on from that, we've had a number of landowners saying that we won't have trail hunting taking place on our land anymore, most notably the National Trust, since then a few others. We've had local councils also say that they won't allow trail hunting on their land. And I think there really has been a shift in public mood about what is trail hunting, why is it taking place, and why are we really allowing this?
So what you've described there is people who are using trail hunting, as you put it, as a veneer in order to continue with illegal activity. But the problem then isn't trail hunting at all. The problem is people who are dissembling and are in fact simply fox hunting, but under a different guise. So why are you targeting trail hunting in particular? And to what extent do you think there are, how many people do you think are doing this? How many people are dissembling in this way? Can you give us a sense of the extent of this?
I'm not going to make a judgment on how many people are deliberately breaking the law, but I am going to say that I think for 16 or so years, the number of cases of wild animals, foxes, hares, but we're not only talking about wild animals, we're talking about farmed animals as well, we're talking about companion animals who have been killed by hunts is significant. And I think what's evident is that the Hunting Act, it needed to be strengthened so that this could no longer take place. And I think there is no way of doing that without saying, actually, trail hunting is in and of itself the problem. We will no longer have trail hunting. That's what we're looking at. And I think what we're seeing at the moment is the last thrashings of trail hunting. It won't carry on indefinitely. These bans that we've seen happen across the UK is the beginning of the end for trail hunting.
For groups of people who are saying to you, look, we go out trail hunting, we never harm an animal, animals don't get hurt, and simply because there are some people who are abusing the system, why would you want to punish those who are not?
It's not about punishment. It's about saying, you know, if you can't carry out an activity without causing harm to wildlife, to farmed animals, to companion animals, and also to communities who live in rural areas, if you can't carry out that activity without causing harm, why on earth should you be allowed to carry on? And there are many other ways that you can get your kicks these days without abusing animals. And I'm afraid this is what it amounts to. It amounts to animal abuse.
I completely understand your point about that. And I think you're right that obviously we must criminalise. Well, it's already illegal, isn't it? Animal abuse is already illegal. I suppose the point I'm trying to make is that trail hunting in of itself here is not the issue insofar as that it is perfectly possible to engage in that activity without harming animals, and shouldn't there be an exemption for that?
A number of us would dispute the fact that it's perfectly possible. The whole point of trail hunting is that you follow a trail and that those with the horses and the hounds don't know where that trail has gone, but the trail is deliberately laid in an area where wild animals live. And so there is almost no way to stop those hounds from picking up the scent of a real wild animal and chasing it. There is almost no way, in terms of the current law, for it to work, for wild animals not to accidentally be pursued by the hounds and killed. But it isn't just wild animals that are being killed. It's farmed animals, it's pet animals. There was a terrible case in Cornwall last year of a pet cat, Meanie, being killed by the hounds. So it's almost impossible for this to take place without causing harm. That's the problem.
Yes, I understand that argument. Do you feel, though, that there are... I mean, it's seen very much as a privileged sport, isn't it? But isn't it part of the rural economy? Isn't it the kind of activity that does provide jobs and livelihoods to other members of the community as well? And shouldn't they be taken into account?
Well, the UK is, of course, is a nation of animal lovers, and I'm very proud of that. But we are enormously creative and inventive when it comes to working out how to make an income and how those existing people can find other activities that we can also be proud of, that are also enjoyable. So I don't think it's saying trail hunting comes to an end, well, we don't know what to do. There is a multitude of other options open to us. And this is for us to use our creativity and ingenuity for the rural economies to prosper and do well. But that doesn't mean it's at the expense of our wildlife, at the expense of our communities, at the expense of farmed animals and companion animals. You know, we are a smart, intelligent, educated nation. We can do better than this. That's what I'm saying.
Yes, no, I understand. I mean, I can see exactly where you're coming from in terms of animal abuse. I suppose I'm a bit wary because it's just an activity I've never been involved with. And I used to think it was a bit of a no-brainer. And then I did speak to someone who used to engage in fox hunting. And for certain communities and for certain groups of people, it is a very important tradition. It's something that's quite elemental to their identity. It's similar, I suppose, you could say, to bullfighting in Spain. And would you say that shouldn't be taken into consideration in any debates surrounding this issue?
Do I think that tradition alone means that we should allow hunting? No, I really don't. There are many things that we've done in the UK that at one time were traditional, that we have decided they no longer serve us, they no longer fit with who we are as a culture, as a society, and we have ended them. And I'm sorry, but it's the same for fox hunting. It may have been traditional at one point, but it no longer serves us how we want to show up in the world. And every single time there is an opinion poll on hunting, the public, they respond in the same way. You know, the latest opinion poll, 5th of December, YouGov, 77% of people said they did not support fox hunting. You know, and those results are they're stable over the number of years. So I don't think there's any public appetite for hunting, and I think the argument that it's traditional, I'm sorry, it doesn't wash with me, and it doesn't wash with the majority of people, I'd say, here in the UK.
Well, a lot to think about there. So thank you very much, Vanessa Hudson, leader of the Animal Welfare Party. So the Northern Ireland Children to Lapland Trust makes children's dreams come true, flying over 100 children a year to Lapland to give them the magical experience of meeting Santa Claus, sleigh rides and much, much more. Let's take a look.
Oh, Frosty the snowman, as alive as he could be. And the children say he'd laugh and play just the same as you and me.
We have all cursed the restrictions of a COVID Christmas and just how it curtails our plans. But spare a thought for those who may not see another.
The Northern Ireland Children to Lapland Trust was formed 12 years ago, and for the past 12 years, well, in effect for the past 10 years, we've been taking a plane full of Northern Ireland children up to see Santa Claus up in Lapland. I say only 10 out of the 12 because last year and this year, I'm afraid COVID has affected us very badly indeed. It meant that last year we just couldn't travel to Lapland. It wasn't feasible to take over 100 children, seriously ill children, some terminally ill, to a very cold Lapland.
The innocence of the children's dreams were being brought to life on a flight to the Arctic Circle to see Santa.
Jingle bells, jingle all the way. Oh, what fun it is to ride in a one-horse open sleigh. Oh, jingle bells, jingle.
For those non-believers, the magic of Lapland is hard to deny. Brought by huskies, skidoos and yes, reindeers, to an underground kingdom where ice sculptures, elves and train rides existed. The families of these seriously and terminally ill children shared an experience never to be forgotten.
It's been about mega memories for the three of them, the three children, so it has, and it's been absolutely amazing. It's like something out of a storybook.
Great, it's great to see all the wee ones, you know, isn't it? Getting to see Santa Claus, wasn't it? Yeah. Good boy. Thanks.
For the past 2 years, this charity has only been able to deliver presents to the children who have had a struggle that most of us couldn't even imagine.
We got all the 110 kids that we were to bring. We got their names and addresses from all the health trusts, and we got them presents to the value of £200, and we distributed those to all the kids in their homes in the week before Christmas. We also get letters from Santa Claus and a video from Santa Claus individually to each of their homes.
I wish I could read this every day about it again.
Back in Lapland, there were gifts aplenty. The magic of the day and excitement in everyone's eyes was a gift that would never, ever fade. The charity is so eager to return to its dream-making flights and realises it brings much more to these children than the experience of the day.
We sometimes take these things for granted, and sometimes the feedback that we get really hits home. We had one letter from a mother and said how much it meant to her daughter to be singled out for this, but not only her daughter, the brothers and sisters, the aunts, the uncles, the grannies, their school friends, the whole community took great pride and joy in the fact that this little girl was going to Lapland, and she said it gave her confidence such a boost. And we maybe sometimes don't recognise just how much of an impact it can make.
As this very special Christmas flight kissed the Irish skyline on its homeward journey, it occurred to me that there were two very different emotions on board. Those of the parents who had made precious memories and those of the children who had had their dreams come true. Douglas Beattie, GB News, Belfast.
After the break, my panel returned to debate whether working from home could ever be made mandatory. And we're going to be talking about UFOs in our media buzz. Don't miss that. All that's coming up.
You're watching GB News live across the UK and the world on our digital stream.
GB News is Britain's news channel.
We are the UK's home of discussion and debate from all perspectives.
We are here for you. Don't forget to join our YouTube community by clicking on that subscribe button.
And if you want the GB News app, you can click and catch up on programmes anytime.
We love to hear from you, so email us.
gbviews@gbnews.uk.
Thanks for being part of the GB News family.
My name is Andrew Doyle. Join me every Sunday evening at 7 p.m. for Free Speech Nation. This is a show where we address current affairs and news stories of the week with the help of two wonderful comedian panellists. I brought in comics because I want to give it a lighter edge, and also they work for less. See you there.
Join my show Farage, 7 p.m. till 8 p.m. Monday through Thursday, and there you will get opinion, analysis, debate, and I'll cover stories that nobody else dares to touch. And then for the last 15 minutes, talking pints. We're over a drink. We have a civilised conversation with someone. We very often disagree, but we do it in a grown-up way. Come and join me on Farage.
I'm Colin Brazier. I've reported from more than 70 countries around the world, covered wars from Afghanistan to Iraq, from Lebanon to the Balkans. I'm trying to bring that experience, that feel for events, to the studio. And something else, I'm ready to give an opinion. Today's stories with a spark. Brazier from 8 p.m. weekdays on GB News.
Welcome back. Tomorrow's news tonight now in our media buzz. Let's kick off with the very first look at the front pages. Hot off the press. The Independent leads with no new restrictions in England before the new year. It reported that the government's decision put it at odds with other parts of the UK, which introduced further curbs over the weekend. The Guardian's gone for a similar theme with England goes it alone. It says the decision has been described as the biggest divergence from scientific advice. NHS staff absences in London could reach 40%, according to one model that was shown to the Prime Minister. My superstar panel have returned, inevitably. Esther Krakow, social and political commentator, Benjamin Butterworth, late editor for the iPaper, and Kerry Dingle, filmmaker. And we're going to be discussing this story now. France has made working from home mandatory for at least 3 days a week. Indoor events also have limits on attendance, and people are banned from eating on long-distance trains. But there will be no curfew for New Year's Eve. Could we ever follow suit and make working from home mandatory? Kerry, do you think that we should do that?
Absolutely not.
I kind of guessed you were going to say that.
No, the idea is horrific. I mean, it's all very well if you're well off in a nice detached house and can pay for deliveries of everything. But for the majority of people, and especially people in a flat with kids, it's a nightmare and shocking and an outrageous authoritarian crackdown on our basic liberties.
Esther, do you have a similar view?
Exactly the same view. I just think this is not what living with COVID looks like.
Right.
And you know where I stand on this, but where is the logic in not being able to eat on long train journeys? Surely that's when you should be able to eat.
Well, it's just disgusting, though, isn't it? Just watching people eat on a train.
The food might be.
Yeah, but how can you tell someone when to eat? Isn't that like? Am I the only person that thinks that's insane?
Well, I mean, it does seem like a strange addition to the regulations, but I suppose I can understand the point insofar as is the view that if you're eating on a train, you won't be masked, and therefore is that what they're saying?
Anyway, but the working from home thing, I just think it's unenforceable.
Okay.
It's unenforceable because I said this last week as well. You will tie up the court with absolute crap. Someone could argue that their dog was ill and for their emotional stability, they had to work from home to be separated from the place where the dog was born. You could argue anything for why you had to not work from home.
What do you think, Benjamin?
I mean, I don't think the courts would be tied up because I don't think they would deal with something like that. It'd probably just be a straightforward fine, like if you were speeding. But what I'd say on the work from home is that it's kind of complicated because on the one hand, Kerry makes a really good point that, you know, I now live in somewhere reasonably nice, but until pretty recently, as a young person working in a big city, the idea of working from home, the flat I lived in at the start of this pandemic was not a nice experience.
Yeah.
And so to have the choice is important. And a lot of young workers, you know, when you're learning your craft, to bounce off your colleagues and learn from them is hugely beneficial. But then on the other side, and I think this is the practical health consequence of why a lot of businesses continued in this country to choose to ask staff to work from home or to encourage it, is because obviously the reality is if someone has COVID and doesn't realise, hasn't yet picked up on it or is asymptomatic, well, the nature of going into the workplace is that they could then risk wiping out a whole load of colleagues, which has a far more serious effect for businesses' functioning.
So is the point, therefore, that we should maybe go back to what Kerry was talking about earlier, which is individual responsibility? In other words, if you are sick, phone up and say, I'm sick and therefore I won't go into work today. Wouldn't that be the sensible solution?
Absolutely. Or to take a lateral flow test. I don't have a huge problem with those. I've had hundreds of youngsters all last year outside our centre having to sit and take lateral flow tests. Yes, it's a pain in the neck, but you know what I mean. The problem was more with people getting pinged for no particular reason.
I don't know why they didn't delete
Well, of course,
the app.
most people have deleted that off the app. So that's stopped happening,
and whole
didn't it?
school years getting sent home because somebody was near somebody who got pinged. I mean, the whole thing got ridiculous.
Yes. Yeah.
But I do think working from home is the state taking a step too far into our lives.
And do you think, Benjamin, can I come to you on this? Do you think that what Kerry's saying about it depends on who you are and where you're living, is there a class element to this? Is there a point that actually some of the more this doesn't affect the more privileged people as much?
I mean, certainly, if you're the boss and you live in a nice house, then life's a lot easier working from home than for many people that don't have that comfort. But I think there are a lot of practical reasons why businesses have put that in place, because, you know, you don't want half your staff coming down with coronavirus because that has a disruption. I think that's one of the reasons why testing makes a lot of sense. You know, I work for a newspaper, so it's you know, hardly the, you know, being down a coal mine, but we go in and we get a COVID test, which is for free in the building when we go into the office. And that's a way to manage the risk.
Yes.
Now, I think actually at this stage of the pandemic, that's something people could do. But I do think that a work from home order is a perfectly reasonable request when you have over 100,000 cases a day.
What about that, Esther, about this idea of, you know, why don't we just say people should test and then take the responsibility to go in or out?
The thing is, like when Benjamin said, you know, you don't want your whole staff being wiped out, we're having this conversation about being asymptomatic, but we're also having a conversation about the whole, like, members of staff being wiped out. If you're asymptomatic, like, having COVID doesn't mean you're going to be off work. It may mean you have to isolate, but you could still work if you could work from home, or you could just wear a mask. Or having COVID doesn't necessarily mean you're in the 5% of people that will be seriously ill with it.
Yes.
And obviously it depends on your age and the comorbidities and all of that. I don't want to do I just want to live life normally. I'm not open, and I know this sounds really horrible, I'm not open to any of this, right? If I have to test because it's the policy at work, fine, then I'll either do that or just get a new job. But I don't really want to look into a future where this is the norm. It's annoying.
I mean, that's a very interesting point, isn't it? The kind of precedents this sets, you know, for
Exactly.
instance, if you're saying that the government can just send out a decree and say that people must work in this way when we decide, Benjamin, does that not concern you slightly about, not necessarily about what's happening now, but what that does later on? That sets a precedent, doesn't it? That the government can encroach themselves into your life and your work.
I mean, even now, they're not forcing people to work from home because there's flexibility in there that if people think it's not safe or reasonable at home, then even now with the current work from home order in England, at least, you can still go into the office. I mean, I'm intrigued by Esther's statistic that she just threw out there, that only 5% of people with COVID are actually ill. I don't know where that comes from.
Seriously ill to the point where you have to be hospitalised.
Right, that wasn't what you said.
No, but that's the point I'm making. You said there were loads of people that are asymptomatic. Well, how do you factor that in? So if you're saying how many people are asymptomatic, let's just throw a statistic out there and say like half of people are asymptomatic.
It's about a third.
No, but I'm not actually stating facts. I'm just giving them like a...
But let's say it's a third.
Okay, let's say it's a third, right?
Yep.
Okay, if a third of people are asymptomatic, okay, what does the makeup of your staff look like? Are they relatively young and healthy? Are they the kind of people that will come down when they had it before? Do they have natural antibodies, which I know is your least favourite thing, you know, the human immune system, right? But what does that actually look like on an actual ground level, right? We're not talking models or statistics. What does it look like in an individual case-by-case basis? And this goes back to what Kerry was saying. Just leave it to individual responsibility because there's so many what-ifs with this magical virus.
But
right?
individual responsibility...
We can't just keep locking down society.
Well, that's not the question we're having at the moment. But look, the thing is, first of all, everyone is asymptomatic at the most infectious, is the evidence we have. And then when they get sick, that tends to be once it's waned, or maybe day 4 or 5 or 6. And so the reason if you have so many cases right now, why it makes sense to have people work from home is to avoid that spreading. But also, one of the reasons to test is to try and pick that up before people feel the consequences of it. And, you know, it's all well and good if you work among other young people to make the argument you do, though I still don't agree with it. But actually, why should places which have a much wider variety of ages, why should the 70-year-old in the office be put at risk?
What happened to autonomy and personal autonomy?
But you don't have autonomy.
But you do have autonomy.
Wait a minute,
your own body.
Hang on, Benjamin, can I just bring Kerry in here?
Hang
on, what about for a while? I'll come back to you in a minute, Benjamin. Kerry.
But Benjamin, surely there is the if we accept that Esther doesn't like it, I completely understand that. But if we have the capacity to take tests, if we're just like you, able to hear the advice and know what's going on, and I don't accept that the vast majority of people aren't concerned about elderly people in their workplace or around them or their family, then we are capable of being trusted and making wise decisions. It seems to me that you don't think most people are able or capable or would do that.
No,
and I think
that's not
you're
what I
very
said.
wrong on that. And I think it's counter to helping us get into a better state. And, for example, doing what would, you know, sort Esther's situation out with a younger generation, having antibody tests.
Benjamin, can I put that to you? Because I think, you know, what Kerry is saying is here, and it comes down to this, doesn't it? Do you trust the public to make their own decisions about their own safety?
Well, first of all, on the testing point, I actually think that's a perfectly reasonable argument that you should work in the office, but you do a test beforehand in a situation like we're in right now. I have no disagreement with that. It's Esther that opposes testing, according to what she said earlier. But of course, people can take responsibility for themselves. It's not really, in a way, it's not about taking responsibility, because the nature of this virus that we've learned the hard way in the last 2 years since it emerged is that if you don't know you have it, if I had it now and I don't...
So the answer is no,
if I had it now and I don't, because I did a test before coming on the set, but let's say I did, I wouldn't know it, and then how am I taking responsibility for the fact that you could have then been infected? That's the problem. It's other people that get the consequence of your mistake.
So in this worldview that you had, what was the point of the vaccine then? Because if you're saying you didn't know you had it, but then you passed it on to him, I'm assuming his individual responsibility, which I keep going back to, would have said, actually, I'm going to take the vaccine because I want to protect myself. So then how does that come back to you then? If he's taken the vaccine to protect himself and you accidentally gave it to him and he doesn't have symptoms, he's asymptomatic, he doesn't suffer particularly heavily from it, does the world stop because you feel so guilty that you gave it to him that now the whole of society must follow your worldview and just be tested, isolate, jump when the government says jump? Like, you know, how do we function in this world?
But you oppose testing, don't you?
I oppose living in a world where we cannot accept that COVID is a part of it and people should be able to do what they make decisions that they want about their health.
Benjamin,
but you don't accept living with COVID.
Let's not get into the rights and wrongs of testing, but can I ask you, Benjamin, about this? Because this is something I'm genuinely confused about. Is if, as all of the news outlets and all the scientists are saying, this is a milder form, and the symptoms are typically like a mild cold. If that is the case, then why can we not trust, and we go back to this personal responsibility thing, why can we not trust those who are vulnerable, in vulnerable categories for whatever reason, their age or their health or whatever, to shield themselves while everyone else gets on with life? Because after all, if we do catch this, as all of us probably will, it's not going to affect us much more than a cold. Why is that such a difficult proposition?
Well, the fact that it seems to be less severe is obviously very good news that we'd all welcome.
Yeah, it's important, isn't it?
The truth is that, and this is what the experts have said in the last week, is that it is much less likely to lead to a hospitalisation, but the sheer scale of numbers mean that in terms of the number of people in hospital, it looks very plausible that we'll end up in a bad situation.
So again, we come back to the shield in the NHS issue. That's for you the fundamental. But
the answer I would put, which they're going to sort of be up in arms about, is this is why you should have a lockdown for the unvaccinated. I don't think the rest of us should be facing the sorts of severe consequences that are possible when it is the unvaccinated, the people who are most at risk.
Do you not see the danger? And again, we go out to a broader historical question. Do you not see the danger of setting a precedent where you have a two-tiered society and people are discriminated against based on their medical history?
It isn't discrimination. Discrimination is someone who's born a certain skin colour or sexuality, a factor that they can't change about themselves affecting their life experience. Someone that has made a choice to not get the 2 jabs or the 3 jabs has made that choice, and those choices come with consequences. And there is no escaping the fact that about half of ICU beds have unvaccinated people.
But you can discriminate for other reasons than immutable characteristics. Of course you can.
Well, hang on.
So, I mean, you're saying that they've made that choice and therefore there should be consequences. That sounds a little bit like coercion.
Ben, you do sound like an extraordinary, I'm sorry to say this, but you do sound extraordinarily authoritarian. First of all, you've said that we need to have these restrictive measures and working from home. And in France, it is the law that you have to work from home. And it's been even worse in Spain and elsewhere, as we know. And here it's just advisory, thank goodness, at the moment, because I don't think people would swallow any more of it. But first of all, you've said that's because of the unknowns. You can't know if you're going to get it or not going to get it or the rest of it. And so, in other words, you've already said, because of some unknowns about a disease, we can't be trusted to make sensible decisions when we're advised in that way. So you don't trust the public. Now you're saying you can't trust, and the people who are the spreaders are the unvaccinated.
And they must be locked down.
Unvaccinated people, I don't agree with, and I've had many rows over this, but unvaccinated people are not stupid, evil spreaders. They have serious disagreements and worries about...
It's a serious disagreement with the
they do have serious disagreements.
Long-term effects that we don't know.
You and a lot of other people who are pro-lockdown and want to make vaccines mandatory have failed to deal with.
I didn't say any of that.
You did, actually.
Benjamin didn't say he wanted mandatory vaccines. He was saying that but you did say
he
that
wanted
a
lockdown
for the vaccines.
Yeah, lock them up.
Just said.
OK, listen, we're going to have to just leave it there because we've got a very important story to get onto about UFO sightings in Northern Ireland.
my
This
God.
is absolutely key. UFO sightings in Northern Ireland have doubled from 2019 to 2021. That is according to the county's police service. The county's police service, that's a mistake on the autocue. It's a country, isn't it? Not a county. There are 6 counties in Northern Ireland. And they've reported an increase in people reporting these sightings. So one person spotted mysterious discs. Oh, goodness, mysterious discs in County Antrim, while another saw strange images on CCTV. Well, we've all done that. I don't think it's necessarily aliens. What's going on in Northern Ireland? Have you ever seen a UFO?
They're just the unvaccinated running away from Ben's lockdown.
It's a nice callback. I don't know if this is... Any of you believe in UFOs? Do you think there's something
to
this?
Can I just say that it's really important to make this correction, Andrew?
Go on.
If they're identified...
Yes.
Then they're an FO. Yeah. They're not a UFO.
Yeah. This is true.
And if they land, they're an O.
Can I... I have a question. What is this
at least 5 in Hackney.
Yes.
And it's when you get that, that smell of that weed that floats down the road.
Why
and
would
then
a
you
UFO
can
go
see
to
4 or
Hackney?
5 of them.
Right. And look, can I just say, by the way, I'll come to you in a minute, Esther.
OK.
I think it's a bit of a non-story. And the reason why I say this, they say this alarmist headline that it's doubled in the last 3 years. It's gone from 4 to 8. So it's an extra 4 people who got a bit drunk. I mean, I've just come back from Northern Ireland. I was home for Christmas and I didn't see any UFOs. I'm a bit gutted. I think that would have livened things up.
What is this obsession with looking for aliens? They're not looking for us. We shouldn't look for them. We need to have a more... I don't understand it. Can we just leave people or things where they are and they can just leave us alone?
Well, they stopped investigating reported sightings in 2009. Okay. And actually some people have sort of suggested that if they were to start re-investigating those, there would be more sightings.
There'd be hundreds.
As in more people would come.
I don't want to look for aliens and I don't want them to look for me.
Well, I mean, I just find it bizarre, you know, aliens aren't coming here, and I just love the idea that so many people who think they've seen UFOs, they think that this alien that's travelled tens of thousands of miles to hundreds of thousands of miles to get here is then sort of hovering above a suburban estate in Slough asking for directions to Asda. Yes. I mean, it's not happening. It's in your head.
Well, I mean, you could say that, but, you know, there are going to be other civilizations out there, aren't there?
I don't want to know about them. I'm not looking for them. They're not looking for me.
We're going to have to go to the break.
Pandemic.
After the break, we're going to be looking at more of tomorrow's front pages. First, the weather.
It's time to remind ourselves there's always another winter. Canary Islands sponsors the weather.
Looking ahead to tomorrow's weather, and the UK is looking wet and windy first thing, but it should improve a little later on. Let's take a look at the detail. So blustery in the morning then across the southwest of England, a mixture of sunny spells and scattered heavy showers. Gales also possible around the coast for a time. A very gusty morning, in fact, for southeast England and the London area as well, with some heavy showers moving through, mild temperatures of around 11 degrees Celsius. Wales also getting off to quite a windy start. Gales across the southwest of the country, heavy showers continuing to move inland as well. Across the Midlands and here, outbreaks of rain are expected as well. Heavy rain affecting the northwest, temperatures reaching around 9 Celsius in Manchester, winds beginning to get a little stronger by lunchtime. And a lot of cloud expected across northeast England through Tuesday morning, with hill fog as well. Patchy rain and drizzle over the hills and especially around the coasts, highs reaching around 8 degrees Celsius. A frosty start across northern parts of Scotland with some sunshine to begin with. Cloudier further south with some patchy rain or drizzle and still chilly with highs of about 7 Celsius. Overnight rain will continue to move away from Northern Ireland with some sunshine developing across the west. Breezy for all, making it feel a little chilly and a top temperature there of 8 degrees Celsius. So rain tending to ease across the UK then as we move through the afternoon, but staying largely cloudy and damp.
Canary Islands sponsors the weather.
You're watching GB News live across the UK and the world on our digital stream.
GB News is Britain's news channel.
We are the UK's home of discussion and debate from all perspectives.
We are here for you. Don't forget to join our YouTube community by clicking on that subscribe button.
And if you want the GB News app, you can click and catch up on programmes anytime.
We love to hear from you, so email us.
gbviews@gbnews.uk.
Thanks for being part of the GB News family.
My name is Andrew Doyle. Join me every Sunday evening at 7 p.m. for Free Speech Nation. This is a show where we address current affairs and news stories of the week with the help of two wonderful comedian panellists. I brought in comics because I want to give it a lighter edge, and also they work for less. See you there.
Join my show Farage, 7 p.m. till 8 p.m. Monday through Thursday, and there you will get opinion, analysis, debate, and I'll cover stories that nobody else dares to touch. And then for the last 15 minutes, talking pints. We're over a drink. We have a civilised conversation with someone. We very often disagree, but we do it in a grown-up way. Come and join me on Farage.
I'm Colin Brazier. I've reported from more than 70 countries around the world, covered wars from Afghanistan to Iraq, from Lebanon to the Balkans. I'm trying to bring that experience, that feel for events, to the studio. And something else, I'm ready to give an opinion. Today's stories with a spark. Brazier from 8 p.m. weekdays on GB News.
Welcome back. I'm Andrew Doyle. Thank you for joining us on this bank holiday evening. Coming up, study drugs. Are they rife at universities? We're going to find out more about these apparent performance-enhancing pills that are helping students, or hindering them, depending on your view, to prepare for exams or to meet their essay deadlines. I've got my superstar panel here with me to go through all of today's news and tomorrow's headlines. They are Esther Krakow, social and political commentator, Benjamin Butterworth, late editor for the iPaper, and Kerry Dingle, filmmaker. And you can get in touch. Let us know what you think about what we're discussing. Just email us at gbviews@gbnews.uk, or you can contact us on Twitter at gbnews. Come on, don't be shy. Let us know your thoughts. But first, it's the news with Polly Middlehurst.
Andrew, thank you. Good evening. The Health Secretary says there'll be no new COVID restrictions introduced in England before the new year. That's despite tighter measures being introduced elsewhere in the UK. But the Prime Minister, Boris Johnson, has urged everyone to continue to act cautiously following the rise in Omicron cases. Over 98,000 new cases of coronavirus and 143 deaths were recorded in England on Christmas Day and Boxing Day. The Conservative MP Andrew Bridgen told GB News the right decision has been made.
Lockdown restrictions, there's a lot of collateral damage to wider society, the fabric of our society, mental health, and of course the economy. I think we need to use them as very much a last resort, not a first resort.
Well, Scotland has recorded its highest number of COVID-19 cases, with nearly 30,000 people testing positive over the three-day Christmas period. And the next few images do show some flashing lights. New restrictions on hospitality are now in force in Scotland to curb the spread of Omicron. And it's the same in Northern Ireland, where the rule of 6 for eating or drinking out has been reintroduced, with table service now only allowed. Meanwhile, the French government will impose fresh restrictions in 2022 to curb the spread of coronavirus. Next week, big events will be limited to 2,000 people indoors and 5,000 outdoors. Customers will be requested to sit down during concerts and not allowed to stand up in bars. Working from home will also be mandatory for at least 3 days a week for employees whose job makes that possible. Those new rules will be in place in France for at least the next 3 weeks. Now, away from COVID, the Business and Energy Secretary has met with energy bosses to ensure UK customers are protected amid rapidly rising wholesale gas prices. Kwasi Kwarteng held discussions with chief executives of major energy suppliers following calls on the government to step in over fears of runaway household bills in the new year. Since the start of September, more than 24 energy companies have gone bust. And a government spokesperson says meetings between the sector and ministers will continue over the coming days to ensure UK consumers are protected. Shopping now, and the numbers of Boxing Day shoppers on the high street fell to almost half of pre-pandemic levels. New figures showed that footfall at shopping sites across the UK yesterday was 41% lower than the 2019 level. The numbers, which come from industry analyst Springboard, says nervousness about the COVID infection rate has played a part. That's all your news from me. Now back to Andrew.
It's just after 11 p.m. It's time for this. At this time every night, we bring you the first look at tomorrow's front pages, hot off the press. So the Eye has gone for no new COVID restrictions before 2022. It says Boris Johnson made the decision after receiving pre-Christmas data. It also says that the NHS is not facing an exponential rise in hospital admissions, although it is still under pressure. This is made worse by thousands of workers being off sick with coronavirus. The headline on The Times is "No COVID curbs on New Year's parties." It also highlights the plight of consumers, saying household energy bills are set to double. The average price of energy bills could reach more than £1,800, according to estimates sent by Ofgem to ministers. The Daily Mail leads with Boris's New Year cheer. The Mail's sources said nothing in the figures suggested that hospitals were about to be overwhelmed. It also highlighted the huge boost hospitality would get from the PM's decision. On the front of the Star, Happy New Beer. You can always trust the Star to buck the trend. Celebrating no lockdown and balmy temperatures of 15 degrees with hopefully a cold beer. And the first picture of Windsor Castle crossbow suspect is being released in tomorrow's paper. The Express has gone for dire warning energy bills could double. It says soaring gas and electricity prices will cause an enormous crisis next year. A bit of doom and gloom on the front of the Mirror. Prime Minister Boris Johnson is a no-show despite record COVID crisis and NHS staff shortages. Uncertainty reigns, even New Year's Eve celebrations going ahead. And on the Telegraph as well, no new restrictions on New Year's Eve. Another story on the cover is the energy story. Bills could treble unless £20 billion fund is set up to help. Ministers have been warned. Now then, students at leading British universities are apparently using performance-enhancing study drugs routinely to prepare for exams or to hit their essay deadlines. It's been reported that the pills are easily obtainable for about £2 each. The best-known smart drugs in Britain are modafinil, which I hope I'm pronouncing that right, modafinil, which is designed to help patients with sleep disorders, and Ritalin, which is used to treat attention deficit hyperactivity disorder. Barbara Sahakyan Professor of Clinical Neuropsychology at Cambridge University and an authority on modafinil, told GB News, modafinil has been shown to be a cognitive-enhancing drug. I have conducted a number of acute studies using modafinil. However, there are no chronic studies in healthy people to show that it is safe and effective in the long term. This is what is required. So joining me now, I've got Niamh Robinson, who's Editor-in-Chief of Impact Student magazine. Niamh, thanks for joining us tonight.
Hi, Andrew. Thank you for having me on the show.
I'd like to ask you, do you think that these study drugs are particularly rife? I mean, I remember being at university and there were equivalents even back then in the old days. Is it really going on a lot?
So I have encountered these study drugs during my time at university. Friends of mine certainly have used them in times of stress, at times when they have a number of deadlines. As you said yourself, the most common drug is modafinil, or MODS, or DAF, as it's kind of referred to colloquially. And I think rife may be a strong word, but I definitely think within a certain type of student population whereby students leave work very late and are forced to cram in order to get it done for a deadline, there is this this sort of draw to these study drugs which enable you to do 12 or 14 hours of work with a sort of hyper focus, which enables you effectively to achieve more.
Nervous when you talk about MODS and DAF. They've got their own colloquial terms now, and that sort of suggests people trying to make them cool or at least accessible. It's something that people clearly talk about a lot. And I should emphasise, I think anyone at home who's thinking of taking any form of drug, you must contact your GP before you do anything like this. Is this the problem, that people are just doing this themselves? I mean, where are they getting them from?
So you can get these study drugs or these nootropics online, and there isn't currently any legislation against obtaining modafinil for personal use. You obviously can get it as well through a prescription, but I think the issue comes in when students buy large quantities of it and then redistribute it and sell it to other students. And as you said yourself, there are serious risks associated with these study drugs. You know, there's been studies which show they're associated with higher chances of psychosis or cardiovascular issues. And I think students take them hoping that they'll increase their, better their grades or increase their focus without actually thinking about potentially some of the harmful side effects that come along with them.
So leaving aside the safety issue, there was a report last year that found that it was a report from 54 British universities, showed 19% of students had used cognition enhancers of this kind. That strikes me as a very large number. So it's obviously something that if not rife, it's certainly prominent. People know about it. But surely, isn't there an element to this where it's kind of a form of cheating, isn't it? I mean, couldn't you compare this to performance-enhancing drugs for athletes, for instance?
So I know that the University of Edinburgh actually said that it was against their code of conduct for students to be using these performance, or cognitive enhancing drugs. And I guess, yes, you could say in some ways it could be viewed as a form of cheating. I think, in all honesty, it comes down to the fact that students feel so pushed that they're actually turning to these kinds of drugs in order to work to really intense deadlines. And I think it's actually quite sad that students are taking these measures. And in reality, it kind of opens up questions surrounding mental health support and, the other avenues available for students, such as extenuating circumstances or extensions, which they can go down before they revert to these potentially harmful drugs, which, as you say, can be considered as giving them an edge over other students who aren't using these study drugs.
I mean, I would have thought that mental health support on university campuses is probably better now than it has ever been. And I don't really buy into the idea that students have it harder than people ever did in the past. Isn't really one of the problems here that if there are lots of people taking these drugs, that you might feel under pressure that if you don't take them as well, you are somehow at a disadvantage? Is that not a possible factor here?
I think, yes, you definitely could argue that. I believe that the students who are taking these drugs tend to be, students who are living or maybe burning the candle at both ends in some sense. They're maybe going out quite a lot and then realizing that they've got a lot of work very close to a deadline, and they have to pull these huge stints of intense focus, which almost aren't possible and they wouldn't be capable of without this help from these drugs as such. So I don't know if necessarily comparing them to the average student who kind of spaces out their work and completes it in a more measured way, actually maybe the two aren't so comparable, and these students are using these drugs because they feel like they have no other choice, because they haven't pre-planned their studies and pre-planned their work to complete it in advance of the deadline.
Do you think that the pandemic has had any role within this?
I think it definitely could be argued. I know a lot of students amidst my friends, we've had discussions that our attention and, our focus definitely took a hit when you're constantly interacting through a screen and you're sat at home all day. It definitely does make it much harder to engage and to really get on top of all of those deadlines and all of the material that we're expected to complete. So I wouldn't be surprised if they found that the pandemic had played a part in a spike in usage of these sort of study drugs. No.
Is there not some kind of stigma, though, amongst students if someone is known to be taking these drugs? I mean, I'm talking to you as a student. You must know people who have taken this. Is there no kind of stigma? Is there no kind of sense of shame about doing it? Do people not give people a hard time if they find out that they're using them? I mean, I would have thought that would be the best way to sort of stamp it out, the good old-fashioned peer pressure.
In all honesty, no, I haven't encountered that kind of pressure at all. I think there's very much an environment of students just wanting each other to get through. We all recognise that people have different coping mechanisms. We all realise that actually university can be really tough. And I think actually, oddly enough, I haven't encountered any stigma. I haven't encountered a student saying, gosh, that's cheating, or I really disagree with that. I think when you actually find out that someone is using something like modafinil regularly, you almost feel quite sorry for them that they've had to go to those sort of quite extreme extents in order to get by. So my initial reaction, I think the initial reaction of the people I've encountered definitely wouldn't be one of kind of shame. It would be more one of maybe concern, in all honesty.
Niamh Robinson, thank you so much for joining us today. It's a very interesting topic. I'm going to bring it over to my panel now because, we mentioned there's shame. Isn't good old-fashioned shame quite a good way to get people to behave well? Benjamin's rolling his eyes in exasperation.
Well, a gay man speaks. Well, the truth is I was interested to listen to that because this report, one of the places where I said the study drugs is rife is the London School of Economics, which is where I did my degree. And it certainly was rife when I was there a few years ago. Now, there wasn't shame. Actually, I'd say there was the opposite. The pressure, at least at LSE, to do well and to get good grades is so intense that people that were doing Ritalin, which was the thing, I mean, I certainly never did it, but it was the drug that was used to have people hyper-focused. That was seen as an admirable thing.
Did people just talk about it openly?
Yeah, absolutely. They'd recommend it. It's the only reason I'd heard of it, because otherwise it,
How did I never hear of this?
No,
I'm not saying I would have used it.
Well, I have.
And
surely
used the drug?
No. I haven't used it, but I've heard of it. And scientists I've spoken to about it, and actually it's rife amongst lecturers and tutors as well. But in my view, smart drugs, these drugs, actually there's no evidence that they're not going to make you cleverer. They can't make you know more. They don't improve your understanding. It's really about concentration.
Concentration, exactly.
Back in the old days, when I was at art school in the 70s, you did caffeine pills, and the rich students did coke and speed and all that kind of stuff.
Is caffeine pills all they did at art?
No. People who didn't have money didn't do coke and speed. That was a rich man's gig. But the thing is, there's no evidence that they improve what you can do, and sadly, there's not enough evidence to look at what harms they might do.
Well, that's the problem, isn't it? I mean, we don't know. I mean, Niamh did mention that there were suggestions that it is linked with psychosis.
Possibly.
Depression is another thing that it's potentially linked with. I mean, I understand.
I wouldn't be against them if they worked and were safe.
Right, exactly. But because they haven't been tested. I mean, I understand the pressure. I do, and I recall being a student, staying up all night, drinking, having Pro Plus. Do you remember the caffeine pills?
Caffeine pills.
And necking it down with Red Bull. I mean, really, that's bad.
God, it's a miracle you're still here.
Well, I mean, that must be just as bad for you in many ways. But, you know, I understand the pressure. But really, once you're resorting to that kind of thing, doesn't it suggest that you're not, let's go back to responsibility.
In the right headspace.
Yeah.
And to be perfectly honest, especially with the university I went to, most people were doing different types of drugs. And so would we boil it down to, I'm depressed, so I'm doing coke in a club to, because of the pressure of trying not to be sad.
Well,
you know what I mean?
Yes, I know what you mean. So almost like you're using it as an excuse.
Yeah, and this is the thing. I'm very sympathetic to young people, and especially during this pandemic and kind of the rubbish card they've been dealt.
Yes.
However, I do think there should be a line that's drawn to what extent are you doing, knowing you're an intelligent person, you're in university, you know the extent to which this is actually going to help or hinder what you're trying to achieve.
I mean, it sounds like at your uni they should have been drawing fewer lines by the sound of it.
But I just... I know loads of people that were very high achievers at university that didn't do that. I mean, I don't think... Did I pull an all-nighter? No, I was just probably more organised.
Yes.
But that's not everyone. But I don't think... things that you can blame on, that can be rectified by being a bit more organised and not going out every day.
This feels like a quick fix, doesn't it?
Exactly.
I don't have to prepare. I don't have to be organised. I can just take the drugs.
Exactly.
While there may well be people for whom it's a consequence of lack of organisation that they end up in this situation, I have to say, and this is a wider point about, there is this perception that young people are somehow lazy. University students are just going out or whatever and not really focused. At least based on my time at LSE, people really didn't go out. They were hyper-focused. It was incredibly competitive, and drugs like this were rife because people were competing against each other, and that's why it was socially encouraged to do these things. Because it was a way to get a leg up.
Of being at LSE. I'm sorry, if you've got 3 A stars, I mean, I get it. That's a very competitive environment. Like, it was the same where I was, but I didn't see it. The difference is, right, it was still a competitive environment where I went to. The difference is they thought long term, right?
Yeah.
It's just about sort of, is it worth doing this in the short term to what I think I'm going to achieve?
Well, what about this argument that should we say that this is? I tried to make the point to Niamh that it's the equivalent of cheating at sports, of taking performance-enhancing drugs. I mean, is there a case just to say, look, I know they're not necessarily illegal, you can get them, but should you? There's a moral.
But they don't make you smarter, like Kerry was saying. They don't make you smarter. They don't make you know more. They don't actually improve any, in terms of the raw sort of characteristics you need to achieve a lot in these institutions. It doesn't actually do anything.
So it's not worth the risk.
It's not worth the risk. I mean, I just don't think. I don't buy a lot of the excuses for this. I'm very sympathetic, and I've always said, university university students and a lot of young people have been really suffered during this pandemic. I always champion their cause. However, this is not one of those.
Yeah, well, and just to emphasise, if you are thinking of taking any sort of drug, you must speak to your GP in advance.
If you can see them.
If you could, thank you, Esther. Anyway, lots of you, nice little dig there. Lots of you have been getting in touch with your opinions on the topics we've been discussing. So let's have a look at what you've got to say. So on texts, to get the booster, Sarah says, these boosters texts are really starting to annoy me. I don't want a booster as I feel my last jab was enough. My daughter's also getting texts from the government telling her to be careful when going out. I mean, so these are... Actually, they're coming quite rapidly, these texts, don't they?
Who gave the government my number?
This is a question.
You did.
Now, look, I've actually seen some people complaining on social media about this, is that people saying, I've changed my phone, I've changed my number, suddenly these texts appear. Yeah. Is something sinister going on? I don't believe it is, but let me just put it out there. Benjamin, what do you think?
I don't think something sinister is going on. I have to say, I got the booster text, which I think was perfectly useful. And I know some people said, I've already had the booster, as I have, so why did I get the text? Well, it's a lot more efficient to just send everybody the text, not to sit there trying to fiddle through who has and hasn't. Some poor civil servant trying to do a spreadsheet. So that's fine. I have to say, what I found slightly odd, and it's the point that viewer just alluded to, is that I got a text on Christmas Eve saying COVID-19 cases are rising in your area, please be careful. And I actually found that slightly uncomfortable.
That's where you draw the line.
But I didn't feel like it was necessary at all. It also didn't have any real constructive advice. It was just sort of like a doom-mongering text.
I wouldn't mind a text sort of saying, here's your reminder to get the boost. But it's the alarmist way in which it was expressed.
Caps lock. Excuse me, we're not friends. Hello.
Mine even had
mind your tone.
Friends use caps lock.
Oh yeah.
No, my friends don't use caps lock. I don't know who you are.
Well, no, come on. I mean, the exclamation marks. There's no need for government advice with exclamation marks.
Was there an exclamation mark?
Well, you just look. let's just reserve exclamation marks for the titles of musical theatre. Let's not put it into government information.
Can I classify it as spam? Is there any way to like stop getting these messages?
I have absolutely no idea.
At this point,
what do you think?
I can't. I've tried.
Do you have any sense of resentment about the government continually telling you what you need to do?
I do find it very intrusive and insulting. I don't think we need it. I don't think it makes a lot of difference either. I think in terms of the news and social media and everywhere else, wise advice and facts are all we mostly need.
Yeah.
And we really don't need this intrusion into our private life. Over the last couple of years, I've had, COVID panics, vaccine panics, booster panics, don't smoke. I've even had stuff on healthy eating, and all sorts of nonsense. But you can't get an appointment. I've got sciatica. I can't see anyone.
There is a broader question here, isn't there, about paternalism and this idea. I just get this sense often. It's very nudge unit, isn't it? This idea that we are kind of cattle that need to be prodded in a certain direction. And I just think, come on, let's just restore some sense of trust. We're all intelligent people. We're all decent people. We can all take the advice and assess it on our own merits. Is that not right, Benjamin?
I mean, I think any intelligent person would get the vaccines and would get the booster jab. That certainly doesn't make them a sheep. That makes them, taking a sensible move. And
I think do you think they would have taken it only because they got a text message in capital letters?
Well, I mean, not only because, but I think the texts were useful because also I think it included guidance for how to get it to go on the NHS website. And there'll be lots of people, and we've seen this, that they're busy people, they lead busy lives, and they've forgotten or not prioritised getting the vaccine. Sadly, you've had 1 or 2 cases of people losing their lives having meant to get it. And so I think over Christmas, when people obviously are a lot less busy, and thank God for the vaccine volunteers still working, it was useful to remind people they can still go and get it now.
So is it just me who's sensing this growing paternalism? Because for me, it's not even about the vaccines. It's just about the language that politicians are using and the kind of conversations we're having. And I just sort of think to restore a little bit of trust. Am I wrong?
I know I sound like a super conservative being like, leave me alone, the government. And I promise I'm not right of centre on every issue. However...
We're still waiting for the one you're...
That's true. I'm not. I genuinely think I try and take a balanced view on most things. However, leave me alone. There's so many things I want to say whenever I get those texts, like, who are you? Who gave you my number? We're not friends. Don't talk to me like this.
Well, let's
and that's just the text from me.
Well, let's move on to this. This is from Tony. Tony said, I had the booster because I'm going on holiday. You might as well as 2 words, Tony. Just get yourself protected. It's not a big deal. I'm sorry, I'm an English teacher. I used to be anyway. Do you think he's right? Is Tony right about that?
I don't. Good for him. I think good for him. I've had the booster, and as I said earlier, I don't think it's a problem if we have to have an annual booster, just as we do for flu.
With flu. They do it with flu.
Exactly, and I don't think that's a problem. I do think we don't need this information stuffed down our throat via our personal communication devices. On a daily, monthly or annual basis.
Wouldn't it be great, Benjamin? I understand your strength of feeling on all of this stuff, but wouldn't it be great, though, if, given that we're going to have to learn to live with this, that it became like where we know about it already, we make our own steps, take our own precautions, we don't need to be... It feels like everything's about COVID, when it doesn't necessarily need to be.
And it does make us stupid.
It feels like a bit of infantilism, but... Benjamin, what do you think of that?
I mean, look, I think living with COVID means getting sort of a booster shot every however many months it may end up being necessary. I think that's a perfectly reasonable measure. Actually, the evidence is, if you look at what's happened, in the last week, there's been a sharp rise in people getting their first dose of the COVID vaccine. And I dare say that's to do with the reminders and knowing that at a time of year when they had days off, Christmas Day, for example, they were able to go and get that. I think 200,000 people got their first dose last week.
Is that right?
Which is hugely great news, yeah.
Well, let's have a quick look at this message from Hemming. Hemming says, Great Britain should be renamed to Great Booster.
Yep.
Very, very simple.
It's incredible to be able to drink anything. We just have all these holes in our body from the boosters, jabs, super jabs, rejuvenations.
Well, I mean, not at all. That's a little bit alarmist.
I'm just so over this.
I have a friend who last year we had a legally permitted picnic, and he'd had a cheap Botox, and his eyes had gone funny. A year later, he says, "Oh, I'm not sure about getting the vaccine. I don't know what's in it." I think there is some odd logic from some people.
Fair enough. And then we've got a quick message now on fox hunting. This is from Andy. Andy says, "Fox hunting is a beautiful tradition that needs to be protected. The city elite need to leave the countryside alone. I was quite interested in this because, I'm going to come to Kerry on this because I when I was talking to my guest about fox hunting, see, it's not really part of my world. I don't know people who are into fox hunting. I don't particularly like foxes, but I don't want to see them torn apart by hounds. I mean, have I not got a point there, Kerry?
Well, I grew up on a farm and we were peasants, really, tenant farmers, so we were allowed to follow the back of the hunt because the land was duchy land, Duke of Beaufort in our case, and so if you're a peasant, tenant farmer, you're allowed to be at the back because it's a very aristocratic rural tradition.
That's what I was going to say, it's quite a
But there were hundreds of farm workers and lads and blokes on motorbikes and everybody following the hunt because it's a brilliant sport. And so I am absolutely with the Countryside Alliance on this. You know, the thing is, nobody follows a hunt because they want to see a fox ripped up. So actually, trail hunting hasn't been a big problem. The point of the hunt is the chase with the hounds, and you're going at incredible speed with hundreds of horses, high impulsion over fences and ditches. It's insane and brilliant. It's like dirt bike riding, if you're into that.
But there is a gruesome element to it. I mean, isn't it? I mean, the fox...
No, it's a quick kill. I don't agree with that.
But don't foxes get tired?
The foxes... I've been in places where you just shoo the foxes out of the way and the whole hunt goes on. I mean, the point is the thrill of the chase, and it's a brilliant sport, and I think the government and animal rights activists who get on their high horse, about this... should just let people get on with their lives. They're not doing damage. I'd start the Hackney Urban Hunt if I could, because it would be brilliant to ride across Hackney marshes.
I'm glad I've heard the counter-argument because it's not one I hear very often.
And they're vermin.
And they're vermin. I accept that. There must be a more cost-effective way, though, to keep the vermin population down.
Well, I came up with Kentucky Fried Pigeon.
But it's brilliant fun, Andrew. That's the point.
Well, look,
I think it's brilliant fun for the fox.
Quick message. Thank you for standing up for the fox there, Benjamin.
Please don't.
So now there's a message here from Irene. I want to get this in because Irene's talking about UFO sightings, and I'm hoping she's seen one. Perhaps it was the aliens that brought COVID to us. No, just a theoretical point. Well, that's a shame. I thought we were going to be able to reveal that someone had actually been maybe even abducted by an alien. Could be quite fun, that kind of thing. I'd be up for that. Coming up, we're going to be discussing whether children should be taken to protests. But first, let's have the weather.
It's time to remind ourselves there's always another winter. Canary Islands sponsors the weather.
Looking ahead to tomorrow's weather, and the UK is looking wet and windy first thing, but it should improve a little later on. Let's take a look at the detail. So blustery in the morning then across the southwest of England, a mixture of sunny spells and scattered heavy showers. Gales also possible around the coast for a time. A very gusty morning, in fact, for southeast England and the London area as well, with some heavy showers moving through, mild temperatures of around 11 degrees Celsius. Wales also getting off to quite a windy start. Gales across the southwest of the country, heavy showers continuing to move inland as well. Across the Midlands and here, outbreaks of rain are expected as well. Heavy rain affecting the northwest. Temperatures reaching around 9 Celsius in Manchester. Winds beginning to get a little stronger by lunchtime. And a lot of cloud expected across northeast England through Tuesday morning, with hill fog as well. Patchy rain and drizzle over the hills and especially around the coasts. Highs reaching around 8 degrees Celsius. A frosty start across northern parts of Scotland with some sunshine to begin with. Cloudier further south with some patchy rain or drizzle, and still chilly with highs of about 7 Celsius. Overnight rain will continue to move away from Northern Ireland with some sunshine developing across the west. Breezy for all, making it feel a little chilly, and a top temperature there of 8 degrees Celsius. So rain tending to ease across the UK then as we move through the afternoon, but staying largely cloudy and damp.
Canary Islands sponsors the weather.
You're watching GB News live across the UK and the world on our digital stream.
GB News is Britain's news channel.
We are the UK's home of discussion and debate from all perspectives.
We are here for you. Don't forget to join our YouTube community by clicking on that subscribe button.
And if you want the GB News app, you can click and catch up on programmes anytime.
We love to hear from you, so email us.
gbviews@gbnews.uk.
Thanks for being part of the GB News family.
name is Andrew Doyle. Join me every Sunday evening at 7 p.m. for Free Speech Nation. This is a show where we address current affairs and news stories of the week with the help of two wonderful comedian panellists. I brought in comics because I want to give it a lighter edge, and also they work for less. See you there.
Join my show Farage, 7 p.m. till 8 p.m. Monday through Thursday, and there you will get opinion, analysis, debate, and I'll cover stories that nobody else dares to touch. And then for the last 15 minutes, talking pints. We're over a drink. We have a civilised conversation with someone. We very often disagree, but we do it in a grown-up way. Come and join me on Farage.
I'm Colin Brazier. I've reported from more than 70 countries around the world, covered wars from Afghanistan to Iraq, from Lebanon to the Balkans. I'm trying to bring that experience, that feel for events, to the studio. And something else, I'm ready to give an opinion. Today's stories with a spark. Brazier from 8 p.m. weekdays on GB News.
Join us for the Political Correction. We're here every Sunday to correct politics and put you, the people, back in charge.
We talk about all areas of the United Kingdom, including Northern Ireland.
Our debate goes way beyond the Westminster Village. It's about the real country. It's about your opinion. So please, we want you to tell us what you think.
This is the Political Correction.
Every Sunday morning from 10 a.m. here on GB News.
You're watching GB News live across the UK, the world, and our digital stream.
GB News is Britain's news channel.
We are the UK's home of discussion and debate from all perspectives.
We're here for you. Don't forget to join our community by hitting the subscribe button.
And download the GB News app so you can click and catch up on programmes anytime.
We love to hear from you. Email us at gbviews@gbnews.uk.
Thanks for being part of the GB News family.
Welcome back. Tomorrow's news tonight, now in our media buzz. I've got my superstar panel, Esther Krakow, social and political commentator, Benjamin Butterworth, late editor for the iPaper, and Kerry Dingle, filmmaker. Now then, a 4-year-old has accidentally been pepper sprayed by police at an anti-lockdown protest which turned ugly in Germany. Footage emerged showing the child screaming after coming into contact with the spray while sat in a pram. So we can take a look at that now. Officers went on to refer the mother to social services for endangering the youngster. So, should children be taken to protests, Kerry? What do you think about this?
Well, I think it's interesting, and I don't think we should take it out of context, because there are demonstrations that are very festival-like. You know, I went on some of the freedom demonstrations, in the anti-lockdown demonstrations in the summer, and there were lots of people with kids and all the rest of it. It was a very festival-type affair, and fine. But this is, obviously, there's been a police crackdown and quite scary. Now, I wouldn't recommend taking a baby or a 4-year-old or a kid on an anti-lockdown demo myself, but I don't think the news would be down on it, or there'd be the crackdown if it was the kids with Greta Thunberg who are out protesting in their hundreds of thousands during COP26.
It's interesting you mentioned that when you have, well, firstly, you have entire protests which are formed by school children.
Exactly.
Because they get a day of school, obviously.
Yeah, and that's OK.
But then you've also got very young children. I've seen very young children with placards saying things like, you know, sort of elaborate statements about the environment. I think you didn't write that, did you? Someone else wrote that.
Yeah.
You know, and I think it's regeneration, not deforestation. I think you can't spell that.
That reminds me of the sketch in Little Britain where there's the guy in the wheelchair that never speaks, and then the David Walliam character always says, but he said earlier this elaborate, informed view.
I mean, don't we worry about that? The idea that shoving a placard in a child's hand, I sort of think, well, you know, I mean, if they believe they're a child prodigy, maybe, but on the whole, I think we should be politicising our children.
This is how Greta Thunbergs are reared.
You think this is
how
it
they're
happens?
grown? Like this? Yes, exactly. This is how they're cultivated. I don't want to see any. Okay, the idea of taking these kids to protest, any protest, I completely get your point. It just makes me very uncomfortable. Kids should be kids. Let them be kids. They can't. If you can't articulate a decent argument, you shouldn't be anywhere near the adults. I don't want to hear you speaking with the grown people. This is how we get Greta Thunbergs.
Yeah, but then you could say, couldn't you, that there are all sorts of situations where we do politicise our children, or at least, for instance, even taking them to church every week is effectively a kind of, we're saying this is an ideology that they couldn't possibly have grappled with. I hadn't read Thomas Aquinas when I was 4, but I was going to church. Well, I was very far behind.
You need smart drugs, obviously.
But I was taken to church, and all the time. So is there anything really wrong with it?
The difference is, though, you could actually, you're not going to be flogged now as a grown man for not being a Christian, right? You could. You were growing up within that culture, but then you could. Well, you could choose no longer to be part of the church or be a member of that faith. If you get a child into politics at that particular age, there could be repercussions. We're living in the social media era. A kid that's 10 years old with a placard, it could come back and bite them when they're 25 or 30. I just feel like there's some things that you can't shake off. I mean,
I'm torn about it, though, because I quite like the fact that so many young people are getting more energised about politics.
I don't.
I think that's a good thing.
I find them so irritating.
But inevitably, they're going to be less informed, and yet there's a certain zealotry that comes with youth. That can sometimes be, if it's misguided, if it doesn't have full understanding of all the facts, it can be, well, firstly, very annoying, but probably not good for them. I mean, let me give you an example. Greta Thunberg, for instance, when she's 24, 25 and her frontal lobes are fully developed, what if she suddenly decides, I'm wrong about all this, how hard is it going to be for her to change her mind? The pressure. I mean, I'm not being flippant, by the way. Young people are not fully cognizant.
We should be able to say the adults are talking. I don't mind you being passionate and whatever. Do it with yourselves as kids.
OK, Benjamin, come in, because you're not...
I mean, look, there's a big difference between a 16-year-old, for example, or an 18-year-old who clearly has the right to vote, so is just as entitled to their opinion as anyone sat on these sofas. That's quite different, in my view, to a 4-year-old in a pram. Now, I'm not completely sure what I think. I know that, some of the anti-vax protests that there have been around Westminster Square have been violent and aggressive from very early on. So would it be appropriate to take a child to that? No, it wouldn't, because they're clearly unpleasant people that go to those protests. However, on the other hand,
Have there been anti-vax protests, though? I've only seen anti-lockdown protests.
Yeah.
And many of them have
I
turned,
didn't see that.
and they've turned violent. I live around the corner from Westminster Square, and so I often see sort of crazed groups of people. And if someone took a kid to some of those, that clearly wouldn't be appropriate. Okay. But on the other hand, why should, let's say, we don't know this woman's circumstances. It seems very odd that social services have got involved.
Well, this is a question. There's a possibility that the reason why social services might get involved is because if someone has an awareness that the protest is likely to turn rough or violent, they might be using that child as a shield. Well, I mean, that would be a strategic thing to do, wouldn't it, to bring a child...
That would be a bit grim for people, and I think a bit of a tall order. People who are going on an anti-lockdown thing are trying to use their kids as a shield. I think that's a bit wacky, Andrew, to be honest. The point I was making is that the differential response and the differential context is what matters here over the issue. It's all cool for kids to be completely used and exploited, to get them out of primary school, missing their education, to go and protest over a nonsense apocalyptic climate doomsday. But it's not OK for them to protest about the denial of their education and the denial of their parents having a normal life.
I did find it very weird, irrespective of what anyone thinks about those particular issues.
But I do think...
It's an odd thing
I don't mind.
Well, hang on.
Can I just say, I do think getting kids getting... I run an education charity as well, and we make films. And I think it's really brilliant. I have met 13-year-olds who have read more Lenin than I have, and I have read.
That may not be a good thing.
I have met 30-year-olds who know nothing. So you do, and there were 14-year-olds who have made revolutions, positive, progressive ones around the world. So I don't think we should get too hung up on age, but I do think primary school. But I do think, and we should support the right to protest. And like the COVID vaccine, we should trust people to make wise decisions about their kids. The issue here, for me, is the police crackdowns on these
But it was
things.
a 4-year-old child. It was a 4-year-old.
I don't.
I think-
Let
Let
Benjamin
Benjamin come in.
Gassed?
Let Benjamin come back in.
They weren't being gassed, they were pepper sprayed. But I think
But that's not pleasant either.
No, not at all. I think when you're at an age where you can barely follow the plot of Wallace and Gromit, then you're not able to make political proclamations. Now, the thing about this mother and the parents taking kids on protests is actually, let's say they're a single parent or, they're working, they might not be able to do their political activism without taking their kid. And
But wouldn't it be better not to get involved in political activism?
Well, if they expect it to be a perfectly healthy, normal protest, and I've been on them in the past, the vast majority are, then there's no problem with that.
I think that what the other point was that this was likely to turn violent, and they suspected that she knew it was likely to.
Though I think that should be a hard thing for the police to prove, because
but they have a responsibility because the kid is 4.
Well, we do have to move on, unfortunately, to the next story. So this is a family who were apparently left traumatised by a dodgy Santa. That's their phrase, not mine. A dodgy Santa, after forking out £144 for a Polar Express experience. So Gina Rawlings-Jones was forced to tell her sons that this was actually Santa's brother who had visited them due to his baffling facial hair. Anyone run into a dodgy Santa?
I mean, I'm sorry, I'd be traumatised if I'd paid £144.
I mean, that's a lot, isn't it? That's more than a West End show.
Yeah,
I mean, why would you do that when you can go and see Back to the Future the musical?
I feel like I shouldn't give my opinion on this because it's not very PG, but...
Oh, OK, fine. But, do you have...
I think that, I'm very seriously concerned about the lack of diversity amongst Santas.
Is that should that be the priority?
They should be more. It should be more inclusive.
The thing is, I always found
discussion is focused on a white beard. That's an issue.
I always found it quite sinister going to the grotto and that kind of. It's not for me, this kind of thing. But if you have run into any dodgy Santas and their dodgy elves or whatever it is, then please do send us in your traumatising stories, and we will. We'll discuss them on the show. So coming up after the break, we're going to be discussing more stories in our media buzz, and we're also going to find out my panel's greatest Britain and Union Jackers. Join us in a minute.
You're watching GB News live across the UK and the world on our digital stream.
GB News is Britain's news channel.
We are the UK's home of discussion and debate from all perspectives.
We are here for you. Don't forget to join our YouTube community by clicking on that subscribe button.
And if you want the GB News app, you can click and catch up on programmes anytime.
We love to hear from you, so email us.
gbviews@gbnews.uk.
Thanks for being part of the GB News family.
My name is Andrew Doyle. Join me every Sunday evening at 7 p.m. for Free Speech Nation. This is a show where we address current affairs and news stories of the week with the help of 2 wonderful comedian panellists. I brought in comics because I want to give it a lighter edge, and also they work for less. See you there.
Join my show Farage, 7 p.m. till 8 p.m. Monday through Thursday, and there you will get opinion, analysis, debate, and I'll cover stories that nobody else dares to touch. And then for the last 15 minutes, talking pints. We're over a drink. We have a civilised conversation with someone. We very often disagree, but we do it in a grown-up way. Come and join me on Farage.
I'm Colin Brazier. I've reported from more than 70 countries around the world, covered wars from Afghanistan to Iraq, from Lebanon to the Balkans. I'm trying to bring that experience, that feel for events, to the studio. And something else. I'm ready to give an opinion. Today's stories with a spark. Brazier from 8 p.m. weekdays on GB News.
A troupe of Morris dancers have ditched their 500-year-old blackface tradition amid a racism row and have performed for the first time while painted green. Its foreman said that while some people might think it is a step too far, he wanted to be on, quote, the right side of things to attract new members. So have they done the right thing? I mean, this is an interesting one. There's been a couple of stories about Morris dancers over the past year relating to the makeup that they use. There was one actually, I don't know if the panel saw this, there was a story in October about Morris dancers in Lancashire who had always worn black makeup on their faces, and they decided that they would carry on in spite of the pressure from other Morris dancing groups. They would continue to do this. But the origins of it aren't to do with race. The origins are to do with there's some dispute, either to do with mining, and because a lot of them come from mining communities, and of course it replicates the coal that would have the coal and the soot. Or alternatively, it used to be a way that, say, mill workers could disguise themselves and go Morris dancing, and their bosses wouldn't recognise them and think they were making extra money by dancing. And that's where the tradition comes from. So it actually doesn't have anything to do with race, does it? Kerry, what do you think?
No, it doesn't have anything to do with race, and it's a shame if people who are into a lunatic tradition can't continue with it. I mean, I find it
is pretty
quite
mad,
scary. I used to have a friend I worked with in the NHS who was a Morris dancer, but it was, and he was weird, I have to say. Unfortunately, it's a bit like people who dress up as clowns. It is a slightly strange. I'm very glad they want to attract new members. I'm really doubting it's going to happen.
I should just say that, you know, we're not smearing all Morris dancers here.
No, obviously not.
Only most of you are lunatics, right? I'm sure that some of you are fine.
I have to say that, you know, when people used to say, and when I've been going around the world and filming, and people have said, what's a British tradition? You know, they know about roast beef, and I would never say Morris dancing.
Well, the thing about it is when you get caught... I was dragged into a Morris dance against my will by a group of Morris dancers in Leicester.
That's a worry.
And they gave me the stick, and, you know, you have to whack the stick. And he hit it so hard, it shattered to pieces in my hand. And I had pains down my wrist for days. So it's a violent sport. Well, I mean... it's actually a dangerous, violent, abominable
Look, Andrew,
thing.
this is rolling news, not therapy, so you might...
Really? I use it as therapy, that's why we're here.
I can only imagine people
Morris
offended
dance,
by the
Ben?
blackface that the Morris dancers had on were probably not black. This is the thing. I've noticed like people being offended on behalf of black people. I don't even know what this thing is. Well, I don't care.
Well,
Good job.
I haven't heard black people complaining about Morris dancing particularly.
I can guarantee you.
Sorry, Esther.
Most black people in the United Kingdom are not thinking of the makeup Morris dancers wear.
I'm sure that's right. And they've sidestepped it now by going to the green makeup. I mean, is that...
I can imagine Insulate Britain.
I mean, Benjamin, you're quite woke. Would you say this is the right move to make?
I mean, look, Morris Dancer Lives Matter, of course, but...
There we go. Glad you said it.
You know,
I've been quite mean to them, haven't I?
Well, look, I mean, the truth is that we know you've explained the historic background to why they wear this colour makeup. I think the truth is, though, that most people are unfamiliar with where it comes from, with the tradition, and would likely be quite uncomfortable, would be less unlikely to engage with the Morris dancing, because I think they would assume it was some kind of blackface. And that's kind of where the problem comes from.
I mean, I wouldn't engage with it because it looks weird.
But this is actually an interesting broader question about this, is that why do people make that assumption in a way that perhaps we wouldn't have 10 years ago? For instance, if I saw a group of people dancing and they've got black makeup on, I wouldn't assume they were some sort of Nazi clan sort of out there, because that would be
weird.
But I would say it's weird, but the assumption of racism is quite a leap, because to do something so overtly racist in public in a country where to be a racist makes you a pariah, why would that happen?
But would you think the same thing if you saw a group of black people with white paint on their face? That's the thing.
I mean, I've never seen that.
No, but I do see it. If I go home, there's this... I don't want to go into that, but there are, like, people that dress up in costume in Ghana. They're black, obviously, and they have white makeup on their face.
And is that part of the tradition thing, or is it a costume?
You know, the ones that are street hawkers,
exactly,
and they try and get money from you and stuff like that. Do you assume they're a bunch of raging racists?
Well, this is the assumption, is that the assumption of racism, to me, strikes me as weird, because I would need more than that to make that assumption, because, you know,
I'm sorry, and I just don't care. Like,
I mean, it is the assumption that most people that see it would come to, regardless of whether that's right or wrong. And of course, you know, just 40 years ago, Saturday night TV involved blacking up. So there are plenty of people who might not even recognise that as a problem.
There's the legacy, isn't there? I suppose you're thinking of the connotations of the black and white minstrel show and that kind of thing. And that tradition is there, and therefore you could... But I just would have thought that in our day and age, you're not going to get people dressing up in that way, would you? I mean, it would be...
Well, hang on. And it's a medieval tradition, and I, on the one hand, I think it's a lunatic medieval tradition, but I also think it's a tragedy that even mad things like this get racialised, and it's a real... Yeah. I mean, and who's doing this? I mean, I think
I have to say this, it's borderline patronising.
Yeah, it is.
I know I make this point often, but I genuinely think there's some people in the media, or people that think they mean well, that genuinely think black people are stupid. If you think we're consumed with But this, are you joking? Like it's
or indeed that black people can't just briefly investigate and see what the origins of and realise what it's about. I mean,
as if me, it's just weird.
As if anyone would, really. Go on, sorry, Ben.
No, I just don't think anyone wakes up in the night worrying about Morris dancers.
No,
besides Morris dancers.
I do worry about cheese rolling.
Oh, but cheese rolling is different because cheese rolling is genuinely dangerous. There are people throwing themselves...
So what is this?
The cheese roll is a Gloucestershire tradition where groups of people stand at the top of a hill and throw a wheel of cheese, huge piece of cheese down the hill, and then throw themselves after it, tumble down to see how quickly they can reach the bottom to acquire the cheese. It is, and there's normally ambulances waiting because people always break their limbs. But it's a tradition.
The aliens are winning.
Now, should that be banned?
The aliens are winning.
Honestly,
they don't wear weird makeup.
They don't wear weird makeup.
That's just me usually on this show that wears weird makeup. But that just sounds totally bonkers. I mean,
it sounds like I made it up. Now that I'm articulating it, sounds like I'm lying.
Who wants to throw?
But it's true.
Who wants to throw cheese away?
Well, there's that.
That is an
absolutely.
issue.
Now, look, we're going to have to move on to the next story. I could talk about that for hours. I'm fascinated by it. But anyway, a man has driven his severely damaged Porsche for 20 miles on the M25 after crashing it. Pictures show that part of the back of the car has come off and been lodged into the boot. Now, and obviously you can see the pictures there. It's not just a scratch, is it?
It's just insane.
According to police, the driver said he thought it would be OK to keep driving it and that he would seek alternative travel arrangements. So have you ever done this? I mean, I can't imagine, like, if there's something... Also, by the way, there's the criminal activity. You know, if you've damaged your car, it is not legal to drive a car. It's dangerous driving. How could you possibly...
Good to know.
Well, yes, if you didn't...
I block out any expensive noises my car makes because it is a black hole of money.
Oh, but Esther, no, you mustn't do that because you're putting yourself at risk.
No, I'll be fine.
No.
I think when they have those little lights that come on the dashboard, I just think that's seasonal.
Yeah, exactly.
I've got no idea what they mean. I have stopped and got the manual out to know what that warning light is, and it says, but if you're in a model K619, then turn to page 300.
I just think
this sounds terrible. I walk up to the closest man and I'm like, help.
No, well, look, whatever
is that related to the car?
Yes, I had to add oil to something. I don't know, and I didn't want to open the bonnet and just pour oil on it. So I was
look, just take the bus or do something else. Don't drive a car that looks like that for aesthetic reasons more than anything else. Anyway, we're going to go on because I do want to get to today's Greatest Britain and Union Jackass. So let's have a look. Who have we got? So let's start with you, Esther. Who's your Greatest Britain today?
The Queen.
The Queen, and why?
Her first Christmas without her boo. An amazing speech. She's had a really tough year. The Markles happened. And she's still going strong, looking fabulous. I mean, need I say more?
No, that's a very persuasive argument.
She's lost weight, I noticed. She looks a lot slimmer.
That's not a good thing. That's not a good thing.
No, but I found it very notable because obviously we've been worried about her health.
Yeah.
And she did look much slimmer in that.
She wasn't overweight, though, was she?
No, she wasn't.
She wasn't, which is why I was concerned by how thin she looked.
Let's move on to you, Benjamin. Who's your Greatest Britain?
My Greatest Britain is the vaccine volunteers who have been working over Christmas. Most of these people aren't getting paid for it. It's not their job. And many of them went in on Christmas Day. And as I mentioned earlier in the show, more than 200,000 people got their first doses. And for some of those, maybe many of those, that's because they finally had a chance to go and get it when they felt they hadn't. And that is all thanks to those people that gave up their time.
Boo.
Thank you,
Why are you booing back to me?
No, I'm just teasing you.
Just teasing you. Kerry, what do you think? What's your greatest?
My Greatest Britain is lesser known, but should be very well known. And he's come up in the end-of-year reviews. And it's a lad, 20-year-old boy, called Jimmy Olabuni Akuwole, which I think is if I'm pronouncing it rightly, is of Nigerian origin, the name anyway. And he threw himself into the Thames to rescue a woman who was drowning. And he sadly drowned himself. And I think he's the kind of young, heroic inspiration that it would be great for more young people to know about and all of us to celebrate. And I'd like him, rather than some of the people who are likely to feature, to be in the honours list.
I mean, such a terrible tragedy, but it just goes to show that there are some people who do have that humanity within them,
Absolutely.
that selflessness that it takes to put yourself at risk. Esther, what about our Union Jackass for the week? Who's your nomination?
So my nomination is Chris Whitty for receiving a knighthood for doing his job, of which he is paid handsomely to do. I don't think, on top of all the money he gets, and everything he does, he should be getting a knighthood on top of that. I thought knighthoods were people that actually did something remarkable outside of what they're normally supposed to do. So, and just the whole doomsday locking us down being him. So yes, for that reason, he is my...
Thank you, Esther. Benjamin wants to react to that, I can tell.
I'm just saying...
Well, I mean, I think being the chief scientific advisor through, the most major public health crisis in a century is a pretty extraordinary...
He was paid for it. He didn't do it for free. Why does he need a knighthood?
But basically everybody that gets a knighthood or any award is being paid.
Well, do you know what? We could debate this all night, and I do just need your nominations, because I apparently need to make a choice.
My uni jackass is trail hunters, those people that have been going out where they lay a scent for an animal and then go hunting. But of course, the dogs don't know which one is a scent and which one is a real fox. So it is offered a smokescreen for slaughtering innocent foxes. And we know that these people, these toffs in tweed, are just thugs.
Toffs in tweed are just thugs. You heard it here first. Anne Kerry.
Well, I'm not going to respond to that rubbish. My union jackass is... I was very torn because I was almost going to nominate...
Chris Whitty's a good one, right?
Chris Whitty's a good one. And I was very torn. But I'm going with Neil Ferguson.
Neil Ferguson.
Godfather of fear, known as Professor Lockdown.
Yeah.
Nearly all his predictions have been entirely wrong, but have been picked up on as, and they keep going back to him.
Yeah. Well, Kerry, that is all we've got time for. I think we've definitely got the gist. That's all we've got time for today, so thank you to my panel, and we will see you here tomorrow.
It's time to remind ourselves there's always another winter. Canary Islands sponsors the weather.
Looking ahead to tomorrow's weather, and the UK is looking wet and windy first thing, but it should improve a little later on. Let's take a look at the detail. So blustery in the morning then across the southwest of England, a mixture of